The morphine drip was already running when I arrived at the hospice that morning. My mother, Dorothy Coleman, lay in the hospital bed that now occupied what used to be her bedroom, the room where she'd taught me to make biscuits, where she'd sat with me through childhood nightmares, where the smell of lavender and old books had defined comfort. If you're watching, please like and subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're from. Now it smelled like antiseptic and dying. She had a rough night, the hospice nurse Sarah told me gently. But she's resting now. Breathing is steady. You should talk to her. Studies show patients can hear even when they're unresponsive. I sat beside my mother's bed and took her hand. It was small, fragile, papery. Nothing like the strong hand that had held mine when I was learning to walk. At 87, Dorothy Coleman had become almost translucent, the Alzheimer's having stolen her body before finally taking her life. "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice cracking. "It's Gina. I'm here." Her eyes didn't open. Her breathing remained shallow and measured. But I kept talking, telling her about the things I'd done that week, the patients I'd seen before retirement, the garden that was finally thriving despite the heat, anything to fill the silence, to maintain the connection that was slipping away minute by minute. 8 months. That's how long I'd been doing this. Since the day Patricia called from Atlanta saying she was too busy with work to help, since Michelle texted from Miami that visiting wouldn't help anything anyway. 8 months of watching my mother disappear into a disease that strips away memory, personality, self. 8 months of being alone. My sisters had visited. Patricia came twice in the beginning, when there was still hope that medication might slow the decline. She stayed one night, uncomfortable in our childhood home, checking her phone constantly. Michelle visited once, brought flowers, stayed 3 hours, said things like, "At least she's not suffering," and "This must be hard for you," then retreated to her life in Miami and her important architectural projects. If you're watching, please like and subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're from. I didn't judge them. Not really. Patricia had a demanding job as a marketing consultant. Michelle had 3 major projects going. Both had families, responsibilities, lives they couldn't simply abandon. But I also didn't have a choice. I was the unmarried daughter, the retired nurse, the one without major obligations. So here I was, holding my mother's hand, watching her slip away. By afternoon, her breathing had changed, becoming more labored, the gaps between breaths lengthening. Sarah checked her vitals, adjusted medications, and gently told me what I already knew. It won't be long now. Hours, maybe a day or 2. You should call your sisters. I made the calls. Patricia said she'd try to get a flight but had a client presentation she couldn't possibly miss. Michelle was between projects, but worried about disrupting the kids' school schedule. Neither could promise to arrive before it was over. "I'll be there," I said, though I wasn't sure if I was promising them or myself. I stayed through the night, sitting in the chair beside Mom's bed, holding her hand, listening to her breathing become more irregular. Around 3 a.m., she opened her eyes, really opened them, focused and present in a way she hadn't been in weeks. "Gina?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here, Mom. I'm right here. Good girl. You were always the good one, always there when it mattered." Her hand squeezed mine with surprising strength. "I'm proud of you. I need you to know that. Whatever comes next, I'm so proud. Mom, don't listen to me. There are things you need to know. After, things about your sisters, about the house, about money. I left letters. In the desk, top drawer. Read them only after I'm gone. Promise me." "Mom, this is crazy. You're going to be fine. Promise me. I promise." She closed her eyes, satisfied, and drifted back into the place between consciousness and whatever comes next. Within an hour, her breathing had changed again, the death rattle that hospice workers are trained to recognize, but that still sounds like drowning to someone who loves the person making that sound. I called Sarah. She checked Mom's pulse, listened to her heart, and met my eyes. "It's time." I held my mother's hand as she took her last breath. It happened so quietly, so simply, that I almost missed it. One moment she was breathing, the next she wasn't. The physical transition was anticlimactic. She just stopped. The essence of Dorothy Coleman, whatever that was, simply left the body like a guest departing a party. The hospice staff came in, professional and compassionate. They cleaned her up, arranged her body respectfully, gave me time alone to say goodbye. I kissed her forehead, which was already cooling, already becoming something other than my mother. "Goodbye, Mom," I whispered. "Thank you for everything." Then I sat in a chair in the hallway and called my sisters to tell them our mother was dead. The funeral arrangements fell to me, naturally. I called the funeral home, notified her church, began the process of dismantling a life that had spanned 87 years. Patricia arrived the next morning, just long enough to attend the service, express sympathies, and leave that evening. She looked exhausted, dressed in an expensive black suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment back when I had one. "I'm so sorry I couldn't be here longer," she said, and I think she meant it. "But the client presentation is tomorrow and I can't miss it." "It's fine, you're here now. We should probably meet with Mom's lawyer about the will and everything. Probably best to get it sorted quickly. I'm sure we're all eager to know what's next." I hadn't even buried our mother yet, and Patricia was already thinking about the inheritance. Michelle arrived on a red-eye the day of the funeral, looking like she'd come straight from an airport. She hugged me at the service, cried, actual tears, and seemed genuinely shaken. But she was also on her phone constantly, texting someone about a project deadline, apologizing that she could only stay a couple of days. "The kids have school," she explained, "and my partner has a work thing, but I wanted to be here for you." The funeral was small. Our mother's church friends, former colleagues, neighbors. 73 people came to say goodbye to a woman who'd spent her life teaching other people's children, who'd been kind to everyone, who'd volunteered at the community center and baked for church potlucks, and knew everyone's names and troubles and triumphs. Standing at her grave, I realized I didn't know her as well as these people did. I knew her as my mother, which is a different thing entirely. More complicated, more fraught, more entangled with my own identity and expectations. If you're watching, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where in the world you're from. The reception was at the house, our childhood home, where the three of us had grown up, Patricia, Michelle, and me, the inseparable Coleman sisters, or so I'd always thought. The next morning, before Michelle left for the airport, Patricia called to say she'd arranged a meeting with Mom's attorney for that afternoon. "We should probably divide things soon," Patricia said. "Split the house sale, divide the bank accounts, make it clean. I'm sure you have your own life to get back to." I did have my own life. Or rather, I had the absence of a life to get back to. Retirement had made me realize how much of my identity was tied to being a nurse, to caring for people, to purpose that was structured and clear. Mom's illness had filled the void for 8 months. Now what? "How about we meet at Mom's lawyer's office tomorrow at 2, Patricia suggested. "I can stay tonight. Michelle can catch a flight tomorrow afternoon. We'll get it all sorted." And that's what we did. At 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, exactly 1 day after burying our mother, we walked into the offices of Coleman & Associates law firm to meet with Thomas Coleman, no relation despite the shared surname, who had been our mother's attorney for 30 years. Thomas was in his 70s, had probably drawn up every legal document our mother had created since 1995. He looked uncomfortable, which should have been my first warning that something was wrong. "Ladies," he said, gesturing for us to sit. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. I know this is a difficult time for you. Let's just get through the will," Patricia said briskly. "I'm sure it's straightforward." "It is, but there are some matters we should discuss before I read the actual will. Things your mother wanted me to explain." He pulled out 3 envelopes, each with one of our names on it. Our mother's handwriting, careful and precise. "Your mother left instructions that these letters should be read after the will is read. But first, I need to tell you something about your adoption, or rather, about 2 of you." The room went very still. "What do you mean, adoption?" Patricia's voice was sharp. "I mean that Patricia and Michelle were both adopted. Regina is your mother's biological daughter, the only one." I stared at Thomas, convinced I'd misheard him. Patricia's face had gone completely white. Michelle's hands were shaking. "That's not possible," Patricia whispered. "I've known my whole life I was Mom and Dad's daughter." "You were," Thomas said gently. but not biologically. Patricia, you were adopted at age 2 from a home where you were being abused. Michelle, you were adopted as a newborn, abandoned at a hospital. Your mother loved you both deeply, but legally and biologically, you were adopted. Why would she not tell us? Michelle's voice cracked. That's addressed in the letters, but I also need to explain the financial situation. Thomas pulled out a thick document. Your mother's estate is worth approximately $2.3 million. This includes the house, several investment accounts, and life insurance. The will divides these assets as follows: 80% to Regina, as her biological daughter and primary caregiver in her final illness, and 10% each to Patricia and Michelle, in recognition that she raised them but cannot morally claim they are of her blood. If you're watching, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where in the world you're from. I couldn't breathe. 8 months of caring for my mother. 8 months of being alone in that room watching her die. And I had apparently just inherited $2 million while my sisters got $200,000 each. This is insane, Patricia said. This is elder abuse. You convinced her to change her will to favor you. I didn't know any of this, I said, my voice sounding distant. Thomas, I didn't know Mom was going to do this. I didn't even know Patricia and Michelle were adopted. Read the letters, Thomas said quietly. Read what your mother has to say. Patricia ripped open her letter with shaking hands. Michelle's eyes were already streaming with tears. I held mine, but didn't open it yet. Some instinct telling me I needed to prepare myself. Thomas cleared his throat. I'll give you privacy. Read the letters. If you have questions afterward, I'm available. He left the room, closing the door quietly behind him. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Patricia read hers first, her face going through emotions I couldn't track. Shock, anger, grief, confusion. She finished and set it down slowly. She knew, Patricia whispered. She knew we were adopted our whole lives and never told us. Read it aloud, Michelle said. Patricia picked up the letter again. Her hands were shaking so badly the paper rustled audibly. My dearest Patricia, she read, her voice strained. I'm writing this letter knowing I should have told you this truth decades ago. But I was afraid. Afraid that knowing you were adopted would make you feel unwanted, would damage the family we built. Instead, I realize now that my silence created exactly what I was trying to prevent. You came to us when you were 2 years old. The adoption agency warned us that you'd experienced trauma in your previous home. They said you might have attachment issues, behavioral problems, difficulty forming bonds. I thought love would fix that. I didn't understand that love wasn't enough. You needed therapy, professional help, understanding. Instead, when you acted out, when you were difficult or angry or withdrawn, I criticized you. I compared you to Regina, who never gave us problems. I made you feel like something was wrong with you when the only thing wrong was that I didn't know how to help you heal. You were not an easy child, Patricia, but you were my child, and I failed you by not getting you the support you deserved. I failed you by favoring Regina, by making you feel less than simply because she was biologically mine. That is my greatest regret. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know, you were never unwanted. You were never less than. Your adoptive status has nothing to do with your value as my daughter and my sister. That has always been between you, Regina, and the choices you make. Patricia's voice broke. She couldn't continue reading. Michelle took the letter from her sister's hands and held it, understanding without being told that Patricia needed someone to anchor her to the ground. I opened my own letter, my hands steady while my insides were collapsing. My dearest Regina, you were always my biological daughter, and I loved you fiercely for that reason and for no reason at all. But I want you to understand something before you judge your sisters too harshly. Their struggles were not their fault, and your advantage was not earned. Patricia and Michelle carry trauma I didn't help them process. I made the choice to adopt them, but I didn't make the choice to truly understand what that meant. I raised them with good intentions but inadequate resources, and then I favored you, my biological daughter, which sent them a message that being real family was better than being chosen. That was wrong, and I'm sorry. I'm leaving you the bulk of my estate not because you deserve it more, but because I recognize my failure to support your sisters. I'm asking you, no, I'm begging you, to consider sharing this inheritance. Not because you owe it to them legally, but because your sisters deserve to know they were loved and valued, despite my inability to show it properly. Whatever you choose to do with the money, do it thoughtfully. Do it with full knowledge that it came from a flawed woman who loved all three of her daughters, but didn't know how to show it equally. I folded the letter slowly, set it on the table, and looked at my sisters. Michelle had opened her letter too. Her handwriting was harder to read. Mom's hands had been shaking when she wrote it. My dearest Michelle, you were abandoned at a hospital when you were born. I never knew why. I never knew your story before you became my story. But I knew that you came to us already hurt, already learning that the world wasn't safe. I thought I could fix that with unconditional love, but I also created distance. I was afraid of your anger, your withdrawal, your pain. So sometimes I pulled away when I should have held tighter. I criticized when I should have comforted. I favored Regina's ease over your struggle. That was a failure of character on my part, not a reflection of your worth. You were the bravest of my daughters. Surviving abandonment, surviving my inadequate parenting, surviving the knowledge that your sisters seemed to fit into our family more easily than you did. But that ease was not a measure of love. It was just ease. Michelle set down her letter and looked at both of us. She knew. She knew she messed up and she was trying to, what? Make it right? By leaving me money that's supposed to be some kind of apology? No, I said, surprising myself. I don't think that's what this is about. Then what is it about? Patricia's voice was sharp. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like she confirmed what I've believed my whole life. That I'm not really family. That I'm less than. That Gina got everything because she's the real one. That's not what the letters say. The letters are what she says after she's dead and can't be confronted about it. Easy to claim you're sorry when you don't have to face the consequences. Michelle started crying. Not angry tears like Patricia's, but deep, soul-shaking sobs. I was abandoned by my birth mother, and then I was adopted and treated like I didn't belong. And my sister, she looked at me, my whole life felt like you were the favorite. Even if I didn't know about adoption, I felt it. I felt like something was wrong with me. I realized in that moment what I'd been too blind to see for 58 years. My sisters weren't villains for not helping with Mom's care. They were traumatized people who couldn't bear to be near the woman who'd adopted them, but never truly accepted them, even if they didn't consciously understand why. This is bullshit, Patricia said, standing abruptly. I don't want Mom's money. I don't want anything from this. I just want my life back to normal where I could pretend this wasn't true. Patricia, I started. No, you don't get to explain anything to me, Gina. You got the inheritance because you're the real daughter. You got Mom's preference because you're biological. You gotta be the favorite. So congratulations on your windfall. She left the room. Within an hour, she was gone. Left for the airport. Presumably back to Atlanta. Back to her life where she didn't have to think about any of this. Michelle stayed. She sat on the couch in Mom's living room, our childhood living room, and cried for hours. I didn't know what to say, so I just sat with her and let her feel what she needed to feel. After Michelle left, I did something I'd been avoiding. I called a therapist. Dr. Sarah Chen specialized in family trauma and adoption issues. I found her through an online search and got in within a week. Apparently, people processing family crises are common. Tell me about your sisters, she said during our first session. So I did. Told her about Patricia being adopted at 2, Michelle at birth. About how I'd never questioned why there were 3 of us when Mom and Dad had only biologically produced 1. About how Patricia had been difficult as a child, Michelle withdrawn, and how I'd been the easy one. And what did that mean? Dr. Chen asked. Being the easy one? I was good. I listened. I didn't cause problems. I was exactly what my parents wanted in a daughter. And your sisters? They were struggling. Patricia had anger issues, Michelle had anxiety. It seemed like they were just complicated kids. Or, Dr. Chen said gently, it seems like they were traumatized children with unprocessed trauma, and you were a child whose needs didn't require much from your parents because you were already theirs. I sat with that for a moment. So you're saying my parents played favorites? I'm saying that your parents made a choice to adopt two children with trauma histories and didn't equip themselves with tools to help those children heal. When trauma presented itself, they managed it by criticizing it rather than understanding it. And they had one child, you, who was biologically theirs, who didn't carry that trauma, who was easy. That made you the measuring stick against which Patricia and Michelle were constantly found lacking. But I didn't choose that. No, you didn't. You were a child, but as an adult, you have a choice about whether to perpetuate that dynamic or break it. Over the next several months, I worked with Dr. Chen to understand what had happened in my family. We talked about how adoption trauma works, how children who've been abandoned or abused carry that deep in their nervous systems, how criticism doesn't fix trauma, it just deepens it, how favoring one child sends a message to the others. You're not good enough. I also researched adoption extensively. Read books about attachment disorders, about how to parent adoptees, about the specific ways trauma manifests in children who've experienced loss. And I realized, my mother loved my sisters. I believe that absolutely, but she didn't know how to show that love in a way they could receive it. She didn't understand that Patricia's anger and Michelle's withdrawal were cries for help, not character flaws. And I had unconsciously benefited from that failure. I called Patricia first. It took 3 calls before she answered. I know you don't want to talk to me, I said, but I need to tell you something. And if you want to hang up after, I'll accept that. But please just listen. She listened. I told her what I'd learned in therapy, what I'd understood about our family, about how Mom's favoritism wasn't her fault. It was a failure of understanding and resources. But it was also real, and it had hurt Patricia and Michelle in ways I was only now beginning to comprehend. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I said. I'm asking for the chance to do better, to acknowledge what happened and try to change it going forward. That's nice, Gina, Patricia said, and her voice was tired. But changing it now doesn't undo the childhood where I felt like a problem that you never had to be. I know. I can't undo that, but I can acknowledge it. And I can refuse to perpetuate it. What does that mean? It means I'm going to divide the inheritance equally. 3 ways. You, me, and Michelle get the same share. Long silence on the other end of the line. You don't have to do that, Patricia finally said. That's your money. Mom was clear about what she wanted. Mom was wrong about what she wanted. And I'm old enough now to disagree with her will without feeling guilty about it. Patricia, you're my sister. Not because of biology, because of 58 years of shared history, shared family, shared love, even when that love was complicated and imperfect. I'm not letting money or Mom's final failing change that. What about the house? Michelle asked when I told her. We were sitting in Mom's kitchen where we'd eaten thousands of meals together, where we'd done homework and fought and laughed and made memories. We could sell it, split the money, or we could keep it and renovate it. Use it as a family gathering place. I don't know yet. I'd want your input. Why are you doing this? Michelle asked. What changed? I got therapy and realized that I've been complicit in our family's dysfunction, that I benefited from you two being treated as less than, and that I don't want to perpetuate that, even after Mom is gone. Michelle started crying again, but differently this time. I don't know if I can accept the money and not feel like it's charity. It's not charity, it's restitution. It's me saying, you were wronged by our mother and by the system that allowed her to treat you as less than. This money is my acknowledgement of that wrong. And you're okay with going against Mom's will? I'm okay with honoring the spirit of Mom's letters over the letter of her will. She asked me in that letter to consider sharing the inheritance, so I'm doing that. Patricia didn't respond well to my offer. She called me a week later, furious. You can't just rewrite Mom's will because you feel guilty, she said. That's not how law works. That's not how family works. I can do whatever I want with my portion of the inheritance, I said calmly. Mom left it to me. I'm choosing to share it. If you don't want to accept that gift, you don't have to. It is a gift. That's the problem. I don't want your guilt money, Gina. I want... She stopped, unable to articulate what she actually wanted. What do you want, Patricia? I want my childhood back. I want a mother who looked at me the way she looked at you. I want not to have spent my whole life feeling like a problem you didn't have to be. I can't give you that, but I can acknowledge it. And I can refuse to let money, or mom's failures, define our relationship going forward. My therapist says I shouldn't accept the money, says it'll keep me in a dynamic where I'm waiting for you to validate me. What do you think? Long silence. Then, I think I'm tired of being angry. And I think maybe you're serious about actually treating this like we're real sisters instead of just pretending. I am serious. But Patricia, I can't do this alone. You and Michelle have to want the relationship too. You have to be willing to work on it. I don't know if I can. 35 years is a long time to believe something about yourself. It doesn't just go away because mom left a letter. I know. That's why I'm suggesting we all go to family therapy together. The three of us. With a therapist who specializes in adoption and family trauma. Over the next 6 months, the three of us met monthly with Dr. Marcus Williams, a Black therapist who specialized in family systems and adoption issues. The sessions were painful, full of crying, anger, recriminations, and slowly, understanding. In one session, Patricia broke down describing how she felt as a child. I remember being maybe 8 years old, she said, tears streaming. We were at some family event, and Mom was introducing us to someone. She said, "These are my daughters. Regina is my biological daughter, and Patricia and Michelle are adopted." Just like that. Separating us. Telling the stranger that I was different. Other. Do you think she meant it maliciously? Dr. Williams asked. I don't think she meant to be cruel, but she also didn't think about what she was saying. It was just a fact to her. But for me, at 8 years old, I heard, "This is my real daughter, and these are the ones we chose." Michelle shared her own pain. I was terrified my whole life that Mom would tell me to leave, that if I misbehaved or if she got tired of me, she'd just send me back. Adoption felt temporary, even though legally it wasn't. That makes sense, Dr. Williams said. Michelle, you experienced abandonment at birth. Your brain was literally primed to expect loss. Every conflict with your mother probably triggered that original abandonment trauma. So she wasn't helping me by criticizing me when I acted out. She was confirming what I already believed, that I was unlovable. Exactly. And the more your brain expected to be abandoned, the more you probably withdrew, creating distance, which your mother then interpreted as you not caring. It's a cycle. I listened to my sisters and realized the depth of damage our mother had caused. Not from malice, but from ignorance, from good intentions without adequate tools or knowledge. Gina, Patricia said, turning to me in one session, I need you to know that this isn't your fault. You're not responsible for how Mom raised us. But I also need you to know that your lack of struggle didn't make you better than us. It just made you lucky. I understand that now. Do you? Patricia's voice was sharp. Because sometimes I think you get to feel guilty and that makes you feel like you're doing something. But guilt isn't the same as change. You're right. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just do the work. Be different. Don't treat us like charity cases you rescued. Treat us like sisters you actually wanted. 6 months after Mom's death, we decided to sell the house. Keeping it felt like perpetuating the past, the place where Mom had favored me, where Patricia and Michelle had always felt less than, where family trauma had been embedded in every room. We hired a contractor to assess what repairs were needed. The house was solid but dated, built in the 1970s, unchanged since. We considered renovating, but decided it would be better to sell to someone who could make it their own, with their own family history. Going through Mom's belongings was gut-wrenching. We found photographs, letters, journals dating back decades. Among them, we found evidence of the life Patricia and Michelle didn't know about. In the attic, we found medical records from Patricia's adoption, documentation that she'd been removed from an abusive home, that she'd had severe attachment issues and behavioral problems that improved with therapy that Mom never pursued. Hospital records suggesting she could have benefited from professional mental health services, but instead was simply criticized for being difficult. Michelle's adoption records showed she was found abandoned at the hospital at 3 days old. No note, no explanation. She'd spent the first 2 weeks in foster care before Mom and Dad adopted her. The papers made clear that early abandonment can cause lifelong attachment and trust issues. information that was readily available in the 1960s, but apparently not information Mom had sought. She knew, Michelle whispered, holding the medical records. The adoption agency sent all this information, told her about attachment theory, about trauma, about what Michelle and I would likely need, and she just ignored it, or didn't have the resources to know what to do with it, Patricia said quietly. She was just a woman trying to be a good mother with information she didn't understand. That's still a failure, I said. Understanding or not, she had children who needed help and she didn't get them that help. But she wasn't cruel, Michelle said. She did her best with what she knew. That has to count for something. It does, Dr. Williams said during our next session. Acknowledging your mother's limitations doesn't erase the damage, but it can help you stop seeing her as villainous and start seeing her as human. And human people make mistakes, especially when parenting trauma they don't understand. The house sold within 2 weeks of listing. We made $220,000 in profit beyond the assessed value, which meant each of us would receive approximately $233,000 from the sale, our equal share of the total estate. Patricia received her check with tears in her eyes. "This is real," she said. "You actually did it. You actually shared." "Of course I did. I promised. Mom never would have." "No, but I'm not Mom, and I'm trying really hard not to be." Using the money from Mom's estate, I established the Coleman Family Healing Foundation, dedicated to providing mental health support for adoptive families, particularly families with children who've experienced trauma. Patricia and Michelle both got involved. Patricia left her marketing job to become the foundation's executive director. Michelle designed our website and helped us create literature about adoption trauma and resources for families. "We're building what Mom should have had access to," Patricia said during our first board meeting. "Information, resources, support, so other parents don't make her mistakes." We partnered with therapists, adoption agencies, and support groups, created a grant program for families who couldn't afford therapy, developed educational materials about trauma-informed parenting and adoption, and we made a point of centering the voices of adoptees, not just adoptive parents. We created a council of adult adoptees who advised the foundation on our policies and programs. "What would have helped you as a child?" we asked them. The answers were consistent. Honest conversations about adoption early on, therapy to process trauma, a family that acknowledged that adoption came with unique challenges, acceptance that you might grieve what you lost, even while loving what you gained. "My parents treated adoption like it was this wonderful gift," one adoptee shared. And it was. But it was also a loss. I lost my birth mother. I lost my biological family. I lost my culture and identity. They never let me talk about that loss because they thought it meant I didn't love them. But I could love them and grieve what I lost. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Patricia listened intently, and I saw recognition in her face. Recognition of her own ungrieved losses. 2 years after Mom's death, Patricia asked to have a private conversation with me. We sat in my living room, my Charleston apartment, not Mom's house, and she looked nervous. "I owe you an apology," she said. "For what?" "For blaming you for Mom's choices. For thinking you were complicit in favoring me. For treating you like you were responsible for the family dysfunction." She paused. "You were a child, Gina. You didn't choose to be the biological daughter. You didn't choose the favoritism. You didn't choose any of it. And I made you pay for Mom's failures for 35 years. Patricia, I'm not done. I spent decades assuming you got everything because you were better, because you were real family. But you didn't get everything. You got a lot, but you also paid a price. The price of never knowing your family was fractured, of not understanding what was happening to your sisters, of internalizing that you were specially good when really you were just lucky. That's not nothing. And I'm sorry for not seeing that." I started crying. "I'm sorry too. I'm sorry for not noticing what was happening to you and Michelle. I'm sorry for accepting the favoritism without questioning it. I'm sorry for being blind. We're both sorry, but we're here now. We're doing the work. We're building something different." Patricia reached over and took my hand. "I just wanted you to know that I don't blame you anymore. For any of it." The foundation had grown significantly. We'd helped over 200 adoptive families access mental health resources. We'd trained 70 therapists in trauma-informed adoption practices. We'd distributed over $500,000 in grants to families in need. And more importantly, we'd changed how we, Patricia, Michelle, and I, related to each other. We weren't the inseparable sisters we'd pretended to be. That relationship had been built on secrets and denial. But we were something better now. Sisters who knew each other's real histories, who acknowledged the ways our mother had wounded us all differently, who had chosen to heal together. Patricia had met someone, a woman named Sarah, who worked in nonprofit leadership. They got married in a small ceremony that Michelle and I helped plan. Sarah understood adoption issues because her own sister was adopted, and she brought empathy and perspective to our family. Michelle had finally allowed herself to pursue her real passion. She left architecture and is now in grad school studying family therapy, specifically adoption trauma. "I want to help families like ours," she explained. "Families where love and pain exist simultaneously." And I had found peace. Not with Mom. I don't think I'll ever be fully at peace with the ways she failed my sisters. But peace with myself, with my role in the family system, with the knowledge that I did the best I could with the information I had. Today is Mom's birthday. She would have been 90 years old. Instead of mourning her, we're celebrating her legacy. Not the biological legacy of DNA and inheritance, but the legacy she created by adopting my sisters. The legacy of a family that chose each other, that survived dysfunction, that learned to heal. We're at the foundation office, hosting an event for adoptive families. Patricia is giving a talk about her experience as an adoptee who wasn't told she was adopted. Michelle is leading a workshop on adoption trauma and attachment. I'm facilitating a panel of adult adoptees sharing their stories. One woman approaches me after my sister's talk. "I'm Patricia. I just found out last year that I'm adopted. My parents never told me. I've been so angry. But listening to your sister, I think I'm starting to understand that the anger doesn't have to define everything." "It doesn't," I say. "But it also doesn't just go away. You have to process it, honor it, and then decide what comes next." What came next for you all? I gesture around the room, at Patricia directing volunteers, at Michelle talking animatedly with a group of teenagers, at the dozens of families here receiving support and resources. We built something. We transformed pain into purpose. We chose to break cycles instead of perpetuating them. Later, the three of us sit together in a conference room, exhausted but satisfied. "Mom would have been something seeing this," Michelle says. "She would have been defensive," Patricia corrects, but not unkindly. "She wouldn't have wanted to admit that she got it wrong." "No," I agree. "But maybe seeing what we've built would have helped her understand, would have given her framework for processing her own failures." "That's generous," Michelle says. "That's growth," Patricia corrects. "We're allowed to acknowledge that Mom did damage, and that we've healed, and that we love her anyway. All those things can be true." On the drive home, I think about the inheritance, not the money, which has been meaningful but finite, but the inheritance of knowledge, the inheritance of truth, the inheritance of sisters who know each other completely and choose each other anyway. Mom left us money, but she also left us secrets that, once revealed, set us free. And that's worth more than any financial inheritance could ever be. Thank you very much for watching. Share with those who also like stories, subscribe, and tell me in the comments if you liked my story. Cheers.